The feed for this streaming event, brought to you by adminmonitor.com, will begin momentarily. Thank you for your patience. The feed for this streaming event, brought to you by adminmonitor.com, will begin momentarily. Thank you for your patience. The feed for this streaming event, brought to you by adminmonitor.com, will begin momentarily. Thank you for your patience. The feed for this streaming event, brought to you by adminmonitor.com, will begin momentarily. Thank you for your patience. The feed for this streaming event, brought to you by adminmonitor.com, will begin momentarily. Thank you for your patience. The feed for this streaming event, brought to you by adminmonitor.com, will begin momentarily. Thank you for your patience. The feed for this streaming event, brought to you by adminmonitor.com, will begin momentarily. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you everyone for joining us today here on Zoom, and congratulations on making it to this interview phase of the application process. We welcome you. We realize this is an arduous process. It's truly aimed at ensuring high quality educational options for Texas students. Normally we would go around the room and introduce ourselves, but today I'm going to take the liberty of introducing our TEA staff and our State Board of Education members. So on our call today, we have Deputy Commissioner Kelby Oser. Myself, Marian Shetty, I'm the Director of the Charter School Authorizing Division here at TEA. From our team, our new schools team, we have John Garland and Natalie Elliott. From TEA's legal team, we have Jones with us. From our finance team, we have David Marks and Pija Stephanarayan. From our special populations team, we have Ed O'Neill and Julie Laura. And from our instructional materials team, we have Lee Ann Lee with us today. From our State Board of Education members, I believe we have member Johnson with us here. Did I miss any TEA staff or State Board of Education members? And I believe we have Dr. Ellis from the State Board of Education joining us as well too. So once we begin, we'll have you introduce yourselves and provide your overview. For our purposes today is Tuesday, May 10th, and it is 2:31 p.m. And it looks like we had State Board of Education member, Dr. Belmetero, join us as well too. So we'll ask that you remain on mute today when you're not talking and only come off mute to talk or ask a question for all of our panelists and board members here today. We've set aside 2 hours for the capacity interview. We started with our introductions. We'll hear your introductions and your overview of your proposed charter school, and then have time for questions today from TEA, as well as our State Board of Education members. We hope to hear from your governing board, as well as the staff of the proposed school. Based on your interview today and the strength of your application, the commissioner will make recommendations to the State Board of Education at the June board meeting. It's our hope today that your application stands on its own merits and will not have any contingencies. However, if there are items that will need to be addressed, staff and our team here at TEA will contact you to address any of those items of concern or omission. So we'll have you introduce yourselves with your name and role only, and then you'll have 10 minutes to provide the panel an overview of your proposed charter school. We'll start the timer when your overview begins, and we'll announce when the time is up. At that time, please bring your overview to a close. Then we will transition into the questions from TEA staff. Please know today is not a time to expand or add anything to your application. With that being said, let's begin with your introductions, and then feel free to begin the overview of your vision after those introductions.
Good afternoon. My name is Stuart Saunders, and I'm the board president.
I'm Catherine Vanderpool, and I'm the board secretary.
I'm Mano de Ayala, and I'm a board member.
I'm Richard Hemdy, and I'm a board member and treasurer.
My name is Sharon Griffin, and I'm a board member.
Michelle Fraga, board member.
Deborah, I believe you are on mute. If you want to try that again.
Deborah Schindler Boltinghouse, board member, facilities.
Angel Adams Parham, advisory board member.
Oscar Ortiz, superintendent. So I believe we can start now. Is that right, Marianne? Okay, here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and start it off then. Good afternoon, members of TEA and members of the board, and good afternoon to all of our supporters who are watching us via the live stream. Thank you all for your collaboration in making today possible. As many of you know, at the age of 21, I moved here to the United States to look for a better future. Never did I imagine how much classical education would prepare me or equip me for that future. With no money to pay for college, it was really out of the generosity of others that I got into a classical education university. I have since gone from being a teacher to a principal to a superintendent in less than 10 years. And I've done that with a desire to give to others, especially disadvantaged communities, the opportunities that I was offered. I have been part of 3 charter startups, one as a teacher and 2 as a school leader, where my team and I had to do everything from scratch, from hiring to finding the right facilities to purchasing curriculum and furniture, etc. And I had my classical education background to support me through all of that. I have successfully led schools of all sizes, the largest being close to 1,000 students. And I have also turned the school around from an F rating to a B-, one of my greatest or proudest moments. I did that in less than a year. But the most important tool that classical education has offered me is that it has taught me how to engage my voice, the rhetorical skill to be able to stand in front of the great leaders of the world and advocate for myself or for the poor or for the disenfranchised who are looking for better educational options for their children. So today I make the case for classical education from both a personal story as well as from empirical data to show the remarkable benefits of this kind of education. With your help, and that is with your approval, we can make this kind of education possible for the children of Northwest Houston. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Catherine. A little bit about my background. I graduated from Rice University with a degree in classics, and I taught Latin for 24 years. I also have a business background. I ran a successful auto repair shop for about 17 years. My experience as a classical curriculum will equip our students with a toolbox that they'll treasure both personally and professionally. Let's just take Latin, the root of 2/3 of all English vocabulary. Latin is called the universal language because of its history, and here are 4 benefits. It's highly organized and logical. Much like math, it trains the mind and it improves mastery of English grammar. It's the parent language of the 5 Romance languages. And the study of Latin will expand our students' vocabulary at an early age. As research shows, larger vocabulary equates to greater academic success. And finally, Latin is the language of oratory, the tried and true tool of influence and empowerment. Thank you. Mano?
To better explain why HCA and why I'm here, I need to go back 62 years when my parents fled Cuba for America. They left everything behind. Here they started over with a new language, culture, and community. They understood that our education was key to unleashing the many opportunities available in the U.S. They ultimately raised 5 sons, all with college degrees. My wife and I are products of our public schools and have raised our 3 sons in the same schools. As for me, I'm an attorney, an active participant in our local ISD, and an appointed trustee to the Wyndham School District, which serves our prison population. It is fundamentally true that we function best when our limitations are removed. A classical education is a valuable tool in our children's journey to adulthood, regardless of the destination. So I'm here to help HCA provide these valuable tools for the next generations of our communities.
Again, my name is Richard Hendy, and I've always believed that having access to a good education, and specifically a classical-based education, is one of the key fundamentals that everyone should have in order to succeed. Over my 50 years career in the financial services industry, I've always been involved with programs that have supported individuals in attaining an education. That is why being part of the HCA board is so important to me. Our board is committed to making access available to the young people and their families living in the Northwest Houston area. Again, and thank you for your time today.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sharon Griffin, and I am a board member of Heritage Classical Academy. And I am also the aunt of 6 great nieces and nephews, ranging from the ages of 4 to 12. And they also live in the proposed zip codes of HCA. When I was first learned about HCA, I was very excited about the model of character building and increasing their vocabulary skills in the proposed curriculum. I believe that this will help increase their level of respect, the values, self-esteem, which will also help them rise above their circumstances. Thank you.
I am a native Houstonian. I am a mother and a wife, and I have been a lawyer for over 15 years. I have my own practice that focuses on complex civil litigation issues. And my family has been very active in Houston's community for decades. I have chosen to focus my efforts on children's health and education issues. My parents were Mexican immigrants and they had a great school education, yet they knew that education was key to success in our country. Despite being from humble beginnings, all 7 of us have graduated from college. I'm the youngest of 7, and most of us have postgraduate degrees. Education is a source of pride that cannot be duplicated. Heritage Classical Academy will fulfill that space for Houston's community and Houston's children. Thank you.
Deborah, you're muted.
I want to speak today thank you, Stuart. I want to speak today from the perspective of a mom that has a child with disabilities. My son, Christopher, had mitochondrial disease, so he couldn't go outside to play. He had a lot of muscle pain, and his eyes did not see what yours and I see when we look at letters and numbers. He was challenged, but he loved to learn. He loved his teachers. So you can see why I have a heart for good schools that work with children who have special needs. And I'm personally committed to children with special needs and other venues as well. I know that HCA would have been a wonderful place for Christopher and will be a great option for parents searching for a special needs friendly school and staff. Thank you.
Angel?
Hello, I'm Angel Parham. I'm a sociology professor with a focus on the history of race and inequality in the US. I've chosen classical education for my own daughters, and I'm active in classical education circles, where I focus on the many ways Black intellectuals have long been in dialogue with the classics. I've co-written a book on this subject called The Black Intellectual Tradition, Reading Freedom in the Classics, which comes out this year in July. I also have an educational nonprofit that provides curricula and programming that invites children of color to see themselves in and be in conversations with the classics. Materials from this curriculum have been used in several US schools and one school in Uganda. I'm very excited to support Heritage Classical Academy's efforts to bring this kind of education to children in Houston. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm here because education is in my family DNA. My grandmother was a teacher, my mother was a teacher, my sister was a teacher, all in public schools. Several years ago, my father and I created a scholarship for kids in Mission, Texas that wanted to go to college and become teachers. Through several generations, our family has supported education, so it was a natural fit for me to get behind HCA and its mission of transforming knowledge into wisdom and character into virtue. So why Heritage Classical Academy? We have no doubt there is a strong demand and a need for our distinctive liberal arts model with an emphasis on character development and civil discourse. We have interacted with thousands of families through our market surveys, in-person meetings, virtual meetings, social media presence, online newsletter, and more. We are now even offering free adult English classes for our potential parents that want to improve their English skills. We know the market is asking for a classical school choice in Northwest Houston because they're telling us so. As for need, one of the many takeaways from the pandemic is that parents are paying more attention to their children's schools. They are waking up to what is and what is not being taught to their children. We believe we were ahead of the curve 3 years ago when we first asked for a classical liberal arts school charter. Now, we feel like we're right in the middle of a rebirth of K-12 classical education. The students are ready for it, the parents are begging for it, and we are uniquely qualified to deliver it. All we need now is your approval to begin offering an outstanding education to the children of Northwest Houston. Thank you. We look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you all. Right on time at our 10-minute mark. I have the privilege of asking our first question. We would love to hear from the board members or from the proposed school leader about any significant changes that you might have made to your overall proposal, since interviewing with us last year.
I'm happy to start that answer. I'm going to start this in terms of our community connections and how we have increased those drastically. As you've already met Sharon Griffin and Angel, Sharon is a new board member with us from our community. Yvette Lino is another advisory board member who's new. We have another one, Carlos Lewis, who's a new board member. He could not be here today because of job situation, working. And these are all people who are definitely heavily involved in the African-American community. And that just adds, they're from the communities that we're going to be wanting to service and help. And that just adds to who we are and how we can reach out to that community. We also have returning board members, Mano and Michelle, who are from the Hispanic community, and our superintendent, Oscar Ortiz, is brand new. So we have added people in that arena too, to reach out again to the community. Our board has spent a lot of time and effort developing an after-school program that's designed for low-income families and for children with severe gaps in their academic learning. So we use those connections that we have in the community to partner with churches and other community leaders to make that happen. And the board plans to provide this program for free. And we would open that up when we opened our school up, once we received our charter. So those are some of the ways that we have changed from and added to from last year.
I'm going to ask Oscar. I'm just old enough to have missed the social media wave, so I don't do any of that kind of stuff. But our school has, like Deborah said, we've sort of upped our game in that respect, and Oscar has been very active in that. So Oscar, I'd like for you to sort of explain some of the outreach that we've been doing.
Sure thing. So we have been very active on social media, as Stuart just pointed out. Starting in December, we got on Twitter, which is the first time I've done that. And we've gone from 0 followers to 1,600 in just 4.5 months. That's not included our Facebook, does not include LinkedIn, does not include YouTube, does not include Instagram. So we've been very active and we've seen a surge in support. We've also had a grassroots. So this is very much in combination with a grassroots boots in the ground strategy. where we have stopped. I personally have stopped and traveled to many of the businesses in the zip codes to where we're going to be at, several of the apartment complexes that we're going to be opening at. I've been to every single library in the zip codes that we're going to be at, making those connections. And the more people find out about who we are and what we stand for, we see that growth in numbers also on social media. So to go back to social media real fast, if you look at our website, we also currently have a subscriber list for our newsletter of close to 1,000 families. Now, we believe, and we have strong reasons to believe, that about 90% of those who have signed up for that newsletter are families with school-age children who have an interest in enrolling. So that gives us a good gauge to measure the level of interest that we're getting from our families. But we've done other things. I don't know if Catherine, I see that you're unmuted. I'm wondering if you were going to jump in there or not.
Yeah, so we were talking about one of the things that makes us unique, or that we've changed since the past 2 years. And I think one of the areas is that we've come to realize education is really the civil rights issue of our time. And we've kind of evolved in that based on just what we've seen going on in our country. And one of the things that's so important for the development of a great background is oratory skills. And so one of the things that we've stressed in our application this year over the past is that we will be an oratory school. We'll be the only K-8 oratory school. Our school is going, no one else is doing this. And it's something that we feel like it's very important, not only for giving students a voice, like Oscar mentioned in his intro, but it's also important for character formation. And that's another important aspect of our curriculum and our ethos is the moral development of our young people. And so using instructional methods like Socratic reasoning, and we want to engage these kids and help them by memorizing things, memorizing short poems, memorizing, even developing the ability to memorize longer pieces as they age, like short speeches of famous heroes of our country and other places. So we think that this is going to make a huge difference in the way they view the world and the way they see themselves. And we think it's going to be a real key to success.
I'll just add one other thing. We've done deeper outreach, I think, than we've ever done before. We've been creative about it. We've gone to churches that have food lines providing food for families, and those cars have lined up for blocks and blocks. And some of the board members, including myself, worked those lines and just introduced ourselves, talked about our school, met the families, because a lot of times they had the whole family in the car, and began recruiting that way. As well as some of the other things we talked about in our application with Build a Kite Day that we're going to do for families. We haven't done that one yet. And then 2 property tax seminars. This brings the family in. And so they're comfortable, they're learning something, and we spend 5 or 10 minutes talking about HCA to introduce that concept to them as well.
I think one thing too that we've all gained is continuing the process. And we've all learned from doing this process before. And we've learned from talking to people, interviewing people, and being out there in the public and learning what their comments are. And the other thing that I think, and it hasn't changed, is our commitment. This board has been committed to this process now for 3 years. We've stuck together. We've been diligent in meeting and getting the questions and the answers to you all that you've asked in the past. And so I think that's an important thing. We're all a lot of the same faces that you've seen before. So we're committed to making this thing happen.
If I can add just one thing to that is, throughout this whole process and each year, again, the board gets to know each other better. We meet regularly. We know that we can't tread water. We got to get better and better. And that's kind of one of the philosophies that we have is how do we improve in this area and improve in that area, and engaging in communities and those sorts of things. And it's been a fun thing to watch and be a part of in this board. So I'm real proud of this group.
Thank you. I'm going to go to John Garland from our New Schools team with the next question.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I actually had a question for Ms. Griffin. Ms. Griffin, you look familiar. I think I recall your support maybe last year. So it's good to see you on the board.
Thank you.
But I did want to follow up with you though. As you see it, what contributions or what voice do you feel you will bring to this board?
I believe that I can support by getting active in the community, letting them know about the charter school, the classical school, and getting more kids and parents involved in the community. I think that I can do that. As a matter of fact, I know I can because I do it now. But yeah, that's what I think I can bring to the board. It's more community activities, getting involved in that, get the parents involved, get the students and kids out there involved, and just doing things that help improve in their education-wise.
Thank you so much. And then Stuart, I have a question for you. I know you have a board member missing, and you all already sort of outlined that you will have a few more board members. Can you kind of roughly outline sort of outside of the cultural piece of it, like what skill sets do you feel you've brought to this board as you've grown it?
Sharon just touched on hers, which is the pulse of the community. You know, she just talked in terms of she thinks she can be our voice into the community and taking our message to them. But I know for myself, and I think our board, I think we equally value listening to her, right? She's going to be the community voice in our ear, letting us know what's going on in her community and on her street and what her great nieces and nephews are thinking and saying and what their concerns are. So she's going to be a great resource for us and what we can learn from her and sort of her ear to the ground, so to speak, in the community. The board member that couldn't make it today, unfortunately, he is a assistant principal at a school, and school is meeting right now. So he's got work to do and he can't be here, unfortunately, but he's been a valuable addition. He is, well, his college education was about education, and his entire career has been in the education space as a teacher and as an administrator, and now he's an assistant principal, and I believe he's the principal of their summer program in an ISD. And so he's a great voice in the public education space for us on our board. And then I think those are the two sort of new ones. Everybody else, I think, if you want me to speak to the legacy board members, but I think you probably already know.
No. Yeah, I was just more interested in the two new board members and kind of what
yeah, it was Carlos and Sharon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Natalie from our New Schools team with the next question.
Well, one piece about the community interaction that I'd just like to elaborate on is, and I believe you mentioned this, Oscar, is the after school program that has been launched as a means of community outreach. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Is that the same after school program from Dr. Parham's program, or what, is there a connection there?
Yes, that's correct. So as a board, we decided that we wanted to create a space for the students where they can get some enrichment with a focus to closing gaps. And we were going to utilize Dr. Parham's curriculum called Nyansa, which she has some experience with, and she can talk more about it. So we dedicated several weeks, in fact, several months, to building some ground support, making the right connections with other nonprofits that would be interested in partnering with us, such as the Houston Mission Centers and the Lindell Impact Church, who is lending us their property for this purpose, and other partners that would be willing to offer us support, such as volunteering or sending some furniture. We had another company just donate the entire furniture for the after school program. So we have that in storage. So we're taking a leap of faith here as we move forward, and we believe strongly that we will make it through this time in hopes that we can have this after school program open. So yeah, the foundation for it is set and we are ready. And nevertheless, in addition to that after-school program, we've also created some partnerships with other after-school programs in the community, such as the YMCA, and especially the one that I'm mostly excited about because it's a very recent partnership with the Boys and Girls Club of America off of Montgomery Street, which is one of the zip codes in which we're going to be at. They're also interested in partnering with us and busing some of our students from our campus to their after-school program. So that's something that's ongoing right now. So we're excited about that as well.
Thank you for providing that clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to switch to a question about the proposal more specifically now. As regards to the demographic projections that you included, can you explain why there's a little bit of a discrepancy between the projections for Heritage Classical Academy compared to the surrounding districts? It's in particular, with certain populations, like I believe there's more white students predicted and fewer at-risk students, I believe. If you could provide some clarity around that, please.
Happy to do that. If you look at our boundaries in 77092, you see we're an HISD and SBISD, and next to us are a lot of SBISD, Aldine and Sci-Fair. So we knew we were going to recruit because those are larger districts from those four. So we averaged all those statistics together to come up with the percentage of equally valuing those four together. And those are our numbers because we're going to recruit from those. We'll also recruit from the smaller ones that are a little bit farther away, but contiguous to us, which is Spring and Klein. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
I do just want to point out real fast that after averaging them, we still ended up higher than HISD under the at-risk category. So we're about 6 points higher. In the economically disadvantaged, we are about 8 points lower, 8 to 9 points lower. But we are comparable when it comes to our African-American community and a little lower in the Hispanic. But you're correct, the white it's a little higher than Houston ISD. In our gifted and talented, we're lower, and in our special education, in order to be conservative, we went ahead and added, so the actual average was 8%, but we went ahead and added 2 more percentage points just to be conservative and make sure that we were prepared to receive all the students that we could that needed some of the supports.
So just to clarify, those numbers are averages of the nearby districts, with the exception of special education, which was a more generous projection.
That is correct.
Okay, great, thank you. I have another quick question about the proposal, in particular regarding the retention policy that's listed regarding literacy levels. So considering the detrimental impact of COVID-19 on student learning and growth, particularly in the earlier grades, which I know that you will all be serving if proposed, what happens if a large number of students are reading behind grade level in the first several years of operation? Would they all potentially be retained? Can you explain a little bit more about that process, please?
I'll start. The school is going to be opening only K-1 in the first year. So we know we're going to be starting small, very intentionally and strategically. So we also expect that maybe even those students will have, be behind in some ways from COVID. So the program that we're using, the phonics program we're using, is probably one of the best tools there is to teach all children, regardless of where they are, to how to read. And our goal is that by the end of second grade, beginning of third grade, they are going to be readers. And by the end of third grade, they are going to be, quite proficient at reading. And I think that this approach has been demonstrated. The science of reading is just very well established to help the youngest children be successful readers. It helps also with children with dyslexia. That has also been shown to be very beneficial to them. But I'll let Oscar add on if he has something else to say.
Yes, Catherine just pointed out one of the strengths of our program, and that is that it's not just horizontally aligned, but it's also vertically aligned, which makes it very easy for our teachers to be able to find the exact gaps that the students are showing. So without that vertical alignment, it would be very difficult for us to know what kind of help each individual student needs. So for example, we would see as students were failing, not necessarily what is the exact TEK or skill that they are missing. So because of that alignment, all of our teachers can see everything. So let's imagine I'm a 4th grade teacher. I can see everything starting in my 4th grade all the way down to kindergarten, and I can see exactly what it was that was required and expected for every teacher to be taught. There's a scope and sequence that we use for that is very detailed and gives every single teacher that map. And that is extremely helpful tool in finding those gaps. Another thing that we are using and doing as part of our accelerated program, to answer your question more specifically, is we are a heavily data-driven school, which is also one of the pillars of our model compared to other classical schools. We have scheduled very regular data dives where we're going to analyze our students' performance. We are going to have a progress monitoring system that we're going to be utilized. It's going to be tied to a software that's going to allow us to see every single and individual child. So I can look at Johnny, for example, and it could show anywhere within the beginning of that year to the middle of the year or the end of the year. I'll be able to see where Johnny is struggling in specific TEKs. And that's one of the remarkable things about the software and program, that it's not these broad strokes, oh, Johnny is just failing type of situation. It's Johnny needs to focus, if he's in the 3rd grade, he needs to focus on TEK 3.2a, for example, or TEK 3. Et cetera, et cetera. So that gives us a very granular approach to every single child so we can work with them individually. Now, in addition to that progress monitoring and software, we're also going to have other programs that are going to be attached to our overall school model to make sure that we're helping every single student, because we're anticipating 100% of our students needing supports. So universally, they're all going to be on a tier 1 starting the first day of school. So we're going to have the MTSS tier system. That means that already there's going to be available universally for all students a daily morning tutoring as well as daily afternoon tutoring. Throughout the day, we're going to have intervention teams that are going to be in charge of making sure that we're pairing students into small groups to target specific needs and TEKs that the children are showing in their tracking that we're going to be using, the software we'll be using. And then we're also going to be adding additional minutes to our math block and our literacy block as well. So it's a combination of things. We do not, and we will not, Natalie, just to give you some peace of mind and confidence, we will not be failing our children. That's important to us. There's nothing that raises a red flag more than when more than, 8% of your student body is being retained. It's unacceptable. So we are going to make sure that we train our teachers to know how to find those gaps and how to close them within a year's time, because that's kind of what the calling is for teachers today, given the situation that happened with COVID. So yes, that's what we're committed to.
Thank you for that clarification. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, Ms. Elliott, I just wanted to expand a little bit more, if I may, on your question about the average and making sure that it was clear that if I actually live in this neighborhood, the 77092 is probably 3 blocks from me. I live in 77018. If you're familiar with Houston, it's almost like a cross section of communities that have come together in this particular area, different school districts. So where you have property values that can range from 2.2 million to under 100,000. And that is how diverse this community is. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood that if there was a discrepancy, it's just the averages, the gentrification that's happening, and the very unique area of town of Houston that we're talking about. It's just where all the communities can, kind of diverge here. So we have the different school districts. I just wanted to be clear on that.
Yeah, and I would just like to echo what Michelle said. I live in 77088, which is also one of our zip codes, and my business for 17 years is, it's actually, they've been there for 75 years, is also in 77018. And Michelle is exactly right. This is a highly residential area, and it's a highly diverse area. And we're very committed to that. We're very excited to be locating in this area for that reason.
Deborah, you're muted.
And my business is in 77092. So a lot of the partnerships we've set up for companies that want to come to our school and talk to our children about what their businesses do, what their employees do, et cetera. And then come and take a tour of the school that would be good for the community, the students, and everyone, that we've got that interest going back and forth, are all in 77092.
I do wonder if Dr. Parham has something to say about the model itself and how it works with some of our minorities. And I'm putting you on the spot, Dr. Parham, but I don't know if you had something on that regard.
Sure. Yes, I'm happy to speak on this. So yes, the value of classical education for all children is so important. And this is something that I feel really passionate about. And in the approach that I take, and HCA has, as they've said, expressed an interest in the program that I've created. The approach that I take is really weaving together diverse voices with the classics. And I don't see them as separate. And it's really exciting to think about more children being able to get access to this. So in the curriculum that I have, for instance, so first I should say that I had an after-school program for 6 years in New Orleans using this program, and I've transitioned to Virginia, so now I'm transitioning it here. But for instance, when we read the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey, we paired that with studying the art of African-American artist Romare Bearden and his Black Odyssey. So that's an example of how we tie things together. In our middle school curriculum, what we do, for instance, is the kids will read Martin Luther King Jr.'s Letter from a Birmingham Jail together with excerpts from Plato's Apology, because King cites Plato's Apology. So there's really, within the classics, there is already all of this dialogue already happening. It's just a matter of bringing those voices out that haven't been brought out before.
That sounds interesting. Thank you.
Thank you for those answers. I'm going to call on Leanne from our instructional materials team to ask the next set of questions.
Good afternoon. Mr. Ortiz did mention the TEKS, Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, earlier. So I wanted to give you a chance to address it more explicitly. So how will you ensure that the core materials you've identified will be aligned to the TEKS, and that the training provided to support those materials will also be given that consideration?
So one of the things that I like to point out, it's not because I want to brag about myself, but it's because it was one of the keys to turning a school around, a classical school here in Schertz, Texas, was that our teachers were not putting enough attention to the TEKS. The TEKS, if you're not paying attention to them, well, they're going to come back and bite you. And what's going to happen eventually is the school is going to end up being an F. So what we did in order to turn that school around was we pretty much revamped the entire approach to the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, and we trained every single teacher on how to understand the TEK, how to implement it, and how to make sure that they were addressing it using the classical curriculum that we have. That showed a remarkable amount of success. So we went from that F rating that I mentioned earlier to a B-. Now there's more to that story, of course. The curriculum itself that we're utilizing is being utilized by several hundred schools across the United States of America, but in particular in Texas, there are about 30, just a little over 30 schools that are already using about 80% of the curriculum that we have as part of our model. showing great success with that curriculum. So it is already compatible with the TEKS. It's a matter of, as a leader, making sure that I do spend the time, and we train, and we'll, if we want to go into details about this, we can. Our training hours every year for every single teacher are about 300 hours a year of training, which is quite remarkable when you think about it. Every single teacher will get 300 hours of training a year under my tutelage. And a big chunk of that, besides being special education and at-risk populations and how to work with our Title I children, it's also heavily focused on TEKS. Now, the software, this is my favorite part. Generally, schools will use kind of a grade book system, right? And they'll give children A's, B's, or C's. We are really kinder through 6th grade. We're more of a progress monitoring system. What that means is that I'm not looking at, did Johnny get an A in his class? I'm looking at, did Johnny pass TEK such and such? Can Johnny show me, and multiple times, not just one, because one could be lucky, right? Could be a lucky strike. But can Johnny show me multiple times, if we repeat it over and over again and we spiral it through several assessments and checks for understanding, that he can pass that one TEK? So the software that we have, which is a tracking, is called Mastery Track, actually allows us to do that. So the report card looks for Johnny, let's say in the 3rd grade, over the top, you have one single row with all of the TEKs for 3rd grade. Then you have Johnny's name at the bottom, and it shows you whether Johnny mastered that specific skill. And that's what gives us really that granular level of attention to every single skill that we're trying to teach on campus. And it's really kind of the secret sauce to the success of a lot of Title I schools. And I'm giving it away. It's recorded now. The whole world will know. No, I'm just playing. But it's really what makes us, sets us apart. And it's what's going to result in the academic performance of some of the classical schools that we put in our application, which are showing remarkable success, especially with low-income children, and are actually beating some of the best private schools in their area. So hopefully that answers your question, Leanne.
Thank you. Yes. It sounds like it definitely has been evaluated for the TEKS coverage. So I did have a question that ties back to Natalie's question earlier, and also what you're talking about with software. You touched on identifying learning loss or achievement gaps. So what shift would be necessary for you to move from remediation towards a more accelerated learning or accelerated instructional approach for those students who might have learning loss or achievement gaps?
I think the main shift would have to be an attention to, so there's 2 approaches that we generally take, and that is small group intervention as well as one-on-one tutoring. And these are 2 of the hardest shifts to make, right? Because if your schedule doesn't allow for these shifts, then it's very difficult to find time throughout the day, especially when it's already so packed, to really focus attention on every child. At Heritage Classical Academy, we have designed a schedule that revolves around our MTSS framework. So it's not the other way around, where we have our calendar, our school events, and then we just slap on or graft onto that the MTSS program. We actually reverse engineer it. We start with the MTSS calendar, all the checkpoints throughout the year that we're going to have to accomplish to make sure that we are maintaining a good and streamlined MTSS program. And then on top of that, we graft all the other events of the school that lend to the school culture, for example. We will have those very punctuated one-on-ones as well as small groups, in addition to the morning and the afternoon tutorings, in addition to supplemental works. If you look at our curriculum under the design category, we have iStation, and we have some technology that we're going to be using for our students to have a more tailored one-on-one and use of some technology to be able to help them close those gaps as well. So all of that in combination is really what's going to lead to the success that we're anticipating.
Thank you for that answer. We're going to now go to Ed O'Neill for the next set of questions.
Thank you. So I'll be focusing on special education and special populations. So in your application, at the beginning, you note that you're anticipating having a part-time special education teacher to start. So what is your plan to transition to, do you have a threshold of which you'll transition to a full-time special education teacher? And how do you plan to support a student if early on, with a smaller enrollment, you have a student enroll that needs full-time support and you only have a part-time teacher?
I'm going to let Oscar carry most of the water on this question, but we have you're right, a part-time in year one, a part-time special education teacher, but we also have a full-time special education coordinator who will provide teaching in the first year and then eventually move into more of a coordinator role as the school grows into that. And given that we're starting very small and we anticipate when we budgeted for approximately a 10 to 11% special ed population, we think we've got the staff that's adequate to address all those needs. But Oscar has much more detail on that.
Before Oscar answers, I'd just like to interject one thing. We prioritized with the full-time coordinator so that that person could be designated with responsibility of handling all the paperwork and the appropriate documentation, so that the part-time SPED teacher can just focus on the students as well. So Oscar, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, so as you notice in our projections, we're projecting about 10% of our students, 10.2% of our students to need some type of SPED service. Now, because we're kinder through first grade, trends or historical trends show that at these early grades, the majority of students, what they are really needing is dyslexia support, so speech therapy. So 50%, so we're projecting 50% of all of our students to have dyslexia or need speech services. That's about 10 of 20 students. So again, we do think, based on my experience working with SPED teams and working with our SPED program, we do think this is an adequate team. Our SPED coordinator, our part-time teacher, and let's not forget our paraprofessional, which we're going to be hiring as well. And then we have 2 aides in the classroom who could also be utilized if we would like to hire them to eventually become professionals. We can paraprofessionals. We can do that as well. Now, the good thing of all of this, however, is that we do have a commitment from the Saunders Foundation, Mr. O'Neill, just so that, again, to give you some peace of mind as well, that will allow us, it's a pledge of $1 million that would allow us to shift pretty rapidly if we need to and adapt to the needs of the school. So with those $1 million, we would be able to go ahead and hire additional team members if we needed to. So we're not strapping ourselves down to a rule or a system already in place, or an expectation, excuse me. We understand that our SPED program needs to be very versatile. It needs to be able to shift very rapidly to serve its students. So if that's the case, and we do see, say, one student in kindergarten, which I've had in the past, or one student in first grade who needs very intensive one-on-one approach service, then we can utilize some of those dollars to hire additional people to be part of the SPED program. So that gives me a little bit of confidence that we're going to be okay.
Okay, and I just want to clarify something I thought I heard you say. So within that 10.2% that you identified in your population, you expect your students with dyslexia to also be included in that 10.2%. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then my other question is kind of along the same lines. Looking at your demographics on page 91, and you talked about it earlier in this interview. The Heritage Classic Academy is predicting or projecting almost 59% of your population will be identified as a student who's at risk. Given that, how will you account for, on both sides of the extreme, risks related to over-identification or under-identification?
Okay. Well, I'd like to start off with that question. We will be doing testing at the very beginning. There's a special test for children entering kindergarten called the Texas Kindergarten Assessment Tool or something. It's TXK. Oscar, you can help me out here. So that is going to give us and plus, I don't know if we've mentioned this, but we should. We're going to be visiting the children in their homes before the school even starts. So we are committed to home visits, so that way we get to know the families as well as the situation of our students. And so we're going to use assessment tools and building relationships as two key ways to try to make sure that these children do not have a struggle, any unnecessary struggles. Again, I will repeat, we're going to be using phonics, which has been demonstrated scientifically to be the best learning method to teach reading skills. And that goes along with dyslexia. So at that, I'll just let Oscar take it from here.
So one of the biggest risks that, as you point out, Mr. O'Neill, that a lot of schools face is over-identification or under-identification, or wrongly identifying specific demographics or subgroups. In order for us to avoid those types of risks, I'm very happy to announce that we're going to be using a service by the APQC, which is the American Control Quality Center, and they are in charge of training teams such as ours to become very effective and implement a continuous improvement strategy when it comes to all of our processes on campus. So we are going to be looking at our data quarterly with the APQC as well as with the board. We're going to do that monthly. And every year at the end of the year, we're going to be assessing whether we've over-identified or under-identified and make sure to make those corrections because we cannot be over-identifying or under-identifying our students. So hopefully that answers your question, Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to Julie with her next question.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'll be asking questions from an emergent bilingual perspective. You noted that you'll be implementing a bilingual program. And I'm just wondering, given the teacher shortage and the issues around attaining the shortage in general of bilingual certified teachers, how do you plan to recruit? What are your recruitment efforts and outreach efforts going to be like for bilingual teachers? And any other critical needs area like special education?
Catherine, I see that you're muted. I'm not sure if you wanted to go first.
Okay, yes, yeah, I can go first.
I could jump in there if you want me to.
Okay, so thank you. First of all, I would just like to say that I just read an article in a journal about teachers and recruiting for classical education, and it's interesting that actually in the classical model, there are teachers actually attracted and drawn to that model. So it did talk about, the teacher burnout and many teachers leaving the profession, and that there is a general overall shortage. But it does seem that based on the information in this article and the associations that they quote and identify, recruitment is not as much of an issue under the classical model. And that has to do something, I think, with the quality of the curriculum and the way that we approach learning. And so I would say that my own daughter is a school teacher and she is bilingual certified. So it will be a process when we hire people to try to get them, if they're not certified, to train them to become certified. That would certainly be one strategy, as well as for any of the other areas of special populations that we need specialized teachers for. So I think that recruitment may be an issue, but it might not be as much of an issue as we might imagine based on the recent research that's been done. And secondly, I think we can train teachers to become certified as we need them to be.
I'm going to add just a few more things to that. I think Mr. Ortiz will talk about, more concrete plan. They have a social media and a whole way that they're going to recruit teachers. But I don't think it's any secret that the status of teachers right now is unsettled and morale is at an all-time low. And I think that Heritage Classical is going to provide them with an opportunity to use their calling, their training, and their skills to make a tangible difference. A school like Heritage Classic is going to give teachers an opportunity that they can't get in a traditional ISD. And it gives them an alternative to use their skills in a very specific and special way that's going to make an impact. So the likelihood is that recruitment and retention would not be a problem with Heritage because it is so unique.
I follow up there. What about the program and what about the teaching experience at Heritage makes it unique in order to attract those teachers?
Marianne, if I could quickly just answer Julie's question, and then we can jump onto that. Is that okay if I just answer hers? Great. Yes. Thank you, Julie, for your question. So this is more anecdotal, but being a Latino myself and Houston having such a big Latino and Hispanic population, there's already a lot of talk. Mr. Ortiz is coming to Houston. Mr. Ortiz is coming to Houston among some of our friends and families. I've got a lot of, being from Honduras, there's a very big Honduran community in the area. And among them, there's a lot, when you look at our Latino and Hispanic population, there are a lot of teachers there who are interested in a model like ours and interested in utilizing both their bilingual certification as well as their ESL certification to teach in our model. Now, frankly, this is going to require some training. We're not opposed to that. I just want to make clear that as a classical school, we're not closing our doors to people who don't have a classical background, because we're very big on training and coaching our teachers. And we understand that the classical movement is a fairly new one. So there's going to be a lot of teachers who are not aware of what classical is. They might have they have similar practices, and they might be surprised to find out, as we point out in our application, that Teach Like a Champion is essentially classical education, as I try to argue. So they'll find that there's a lot of cross references between the two. And my hope is to be able to draw those teachers as well. So when looking at options, we're hiring a company that's going to help us do that as well. I'm going to be dedicating about 50% of all my attention between the moment of authorization to the opening of the school to just hiring. We're going to be looking at alternative certification programs. We're going to be looking at schools in the area in Houston, such as HBU and Rice University and other schools here in Texas that offer teacher certificates in bilingual as well as ESL. So our net is wide. We're not limiting it, and we're not barring anyone from being able to be a part of our team as long as they show a commitment to learning the classical model. So that's why we don't anticipate many problems. I do agree with you that there will be some challenges, because I've seen kind of the fluctuation of interest in coming back to the school. So I'm not going to say it's going to be completely easy, but we do with the combination of programs that we're going to be implementing to reach out to our families and to our potential candidates, I think we'll have some success.
Okay, thank you very much, all of you, for your answers.
And I'd like to address Ms. Shetty's question about why are teachers going to be attracted to the classical model? And I think that what we really need to talk about is, what is our model and what is our vision? So the classical, when we did a survey of 309 mostly Hispanic families, we had to give them a definition of what a classical education was, because honestly, they didn't know. But when they learned what it was, they were attracted to it. And I think just as parents were attracted to it, I think teachers will be too. So this is the definition that we gave them. A classical education is a curriculum where students read entire books, memorize poetry, study great philosophical ideas, learn foundational math and science principles, study both ancient and American history, and develop a love for beauty and truth. And I would just add that when we say ancient history, we mean from all cultures, not specifically Western cultures. And we have a character component that is so integral to our curriculum. And so our core virtues of responsibility, justice, prudence, citizenship, moderation, courage, and wisdom, this is going to be inspiring to anybody who wants a higher than more than just a get work ready education for the population. I mean, because we're emphasizing citizenship, we're emphasizing good moral character. And what teacher doesn't want to be part of that and has got a mastery of her content that she wants to share or he wants to share with students, and that love of learning? And that's I think what classical education comes down to. We preserve the love of learning. It's important.
Thank you.
I love your passion, Catherine, if I can just add to that. And Marianne, I've been going back and forth between Mr. and Mrs. and then first names. I just want to make sure I'm doing this right. Should I, because I called Julie, but then I called Mr. O'Neill, and I want to make sure I'm consistent. First name basis, is that okay? All right, here we go. So to add on to that, and I love Catherine's enthusiasm. Working with her over the last year has been fantastic for that reason, because we share in a lot of the same passion about classical education. I want to talk a little bit about the logistical and the operational side when it comes to being a teacher at our school. One of the things that make our teachers very attracted to working at a classical school is the level of supports that they receive. One of the things that I hear a lot from teachers who come to our doors to be interviewed is, I don't feel like I'm being supported by the administration of other schools. And this is not a slight against public schools. This is true about charter schools and private schools as well. Teachers are looking for a team that will care for them, that will make sure to support them, that will not judge or not trust them whenever they send a child to the principal's office, but that will look and think of them as professionals. So the level of support is very significantly different. Our philosophy of how do we care for our teachers is what changes that. We look at the teacher's primary role as being that as guiding and teaching students in great and beautiful content and engaging the imagination and the sense of wonder. So there's a romantic and poetic side to it. So those are the supports in the classroom. In addition to that is the amount of coaching and mentoring that we give our teachers. So when it comes to professional development, I mentioned earlier that our teachers are receiving close to 300 hours of training a year. This is one thing that our teachers really value. We might not be able to always compete with the salaries of public schools, but nevertheless, I've seen teachers over the last 10 years that we've been receiving them on our campus. We've seen teachers say, it's okay, Mr. Ortiz, I'm perfectly willing getting a pay cut as long as I'm part of a community that cares and loves for me and will dedicate their time to developing my own skills as a classroom teacher. So that degree of attention to their own growth and the craft of teaching that classical schools offer teachers is very attractive to a lot of the teachers coming to us. So I think those are the things that, in addition to what Catherine just pointed out, makes us a very attractive option for a lot of individuals looking for something different.
Thank you. I'm going to go to David Marks with our next question.
Hey, good afternoon. Good to see some of you again. So my first question probably is more broad than just as you are working through the budget. It's partly also cautionary. The attendance rates you used to project your attendance rates was 95%. You guys have seen what the pandemic has caused over the last couple of years to attendance rates and enrollment for school districts and charter schools across the state. It's it's wreaked havoc on them. We've provided, or the state has provided, 2 hold harmless calculations for them. So we've provided additional state funding for them. And then this year, for the first 4 6-week periods, we're providing on an operational minutes adjustment, which essentially is going to raise the attendance rate for everybody across the state to be more in alignment with what they're used to seeing. And so I say that because not knowing what's going to happen with the pandemic, or what types of things will happen down the road. With using a 95% rate, that's obviously 15% more than what is in the budget itself that we recommend. And so You've built your budget based on that 95%. So I'd like to hear y'all kind of talk through any contingencies you have with getting or having that lower attendance rate and what you plan on and how you'll be able to make adjustments in your budget for that.
Well, yeah, we built the budget based on historical averages and historical experience and not necessarily COVID experience. And obviously we're hopeful that we're sort of on the back end of COVID and that we can attendance at school can begin to normalize. We feel like that's important, as has already been discussed today here on some of the other answers, that it's no secret that not coming to school has had an extremely negative impact on educational progress. And so we're obviously going to be pushing heavily, obviously within the bounds of public health and good reason, but we're going to be pushing for attendance at school. In terms of the budget, I think our school is fortunate in the sense that we have over $1 million in philanthropic dollars committed to our launch. And those dollars are readily available so that if we end up having some sort of budgetary shock or some sort of experience like extremely low attendance or another health crisis, which keeps everyone at home, we're going to have, in my opinion, more than adequate dollars to backfill our budget any way we need to continue to survive and to deliver great education. So I mean that's really the shortest answer is we have a strong financial backing, philanthropic backing that's going to backfill any surprises.
And just to follow up on that, you have pledges of support, and I noticed many of those letters had a spring of 2021 date on them. Are all of those pledges of support that you've included in this application, are those all still accurate and reflect that you still have the backing of those donors?
Yeah, yes, we do. It's sort of a fine line. We went out to our supporters and people that believe in our mission and gathered their commitments and their pledges. We've collected actual dollars. We've collected pledges, and we sort of were kind of walking the tightrope of we don't want to just unnecessarily bother them or we don't want to make work for our supporters. So we didn't go back and say, oh, can all these pledge letters, can we get them redone with the new date on there? But I'll say that our support is not waning. Our support is actually growing. And I feel confident that, well, quite frankly, I've done very little fundraising because I haven't felt the need, but assuming we get a charter, get approved for a charter, then I'm going to, one of my personal responsibilities on the board is to begin some philanthropic efforts and to go out into the community and to start gathering more pledges and gathering donated dollars to help our launch. So I feel very confident in our philanthropic support.
And I think that goes back a little to what Mr. Garland asked earlier about the board and I think of just a brief introduction to our board members, you can see that we're not quitters and we're not going to quit on the school and our goals. We do come from diverse backgrounds. We do each bring a unique aspect to the board. And what that uniqueness is what brings us together in this one goal and our dedication to seeing heritage become successful. That's, an issue where we can all come together and bring our own unique aspects.
It's hard to say this, but it's true. There's advantages about this being our third year. We have a lot of people who know us, who have followed us, who have warmed to the idea of what we're trying to do, who've asked questions, who've gotten involved, who've given us money in the last month or two, who said they'll do this and this. So it has really been a evolving situation that's been good.
And I just have to share from my experience that you know, when I first told people that, well, hey, I'm starting a school with a group of people, they just kind of looked at me like, oh yeah, right, sure. But now this is the third year. It's like, okay, you really are. Oh my gosh, I'm so impressed. We love what you're doing. And we are so committed to serving the people the children who didn't get the kind of education that you know, their parents had, or that the kind of education that might not be available in their neighborhood. And that's really, I think, what's kept this board together, is because we are, you know, the children from the most affluent families, they're fine. It's the ones that are not, you know, who are in the bottom half, they're not fine, and they need help, and they need our school. And that's why we're committed to doing this. Our friends are committed to doing this. We have a lot of support.
I've got to pile on a little bit here. I mean, the tenacity of Stuart and the rest of these board members, both the newer ones and the ones that have been with us since the beginning, is an inspiration. Nobody knew about us 2.5, 3 years ago, but when we're in gatherings, we have a lot of cheerleaders wanting us to succeed, and it's inspiring. So.
Thank you. We've reached our time period for our initial set of questions from our TEA panel. Now is the time for our State Board of Education members. If they have questions, I believe we have a number that are on. Dr. Bill Meadow, I saw you come off of the video first, so I'll go ahead and have you go first.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. There are a few things that I was wondering about. The more recent studies of relying on phonics, over-reliance on phonics, is that it is really not effective. And this is something that studies in the UK have been demonstrating in recent years. So I think on a larger issue, it sounds to me like you're really teaching to the test. And that is another thing that concerns me, because studies have shown that teaching to the test gets good test scores and not good learning. So how are you going to get it so that kids actually enjoy reading and reading for fun and exploring? Because it sounds like you have such a kind of a rigid regime. I mean, everything is nailed down. We're going to study every last little thing the kid doesn't know and drill it into their heads. I know you don't want to do it that way, but it has a little bit of that flavor. So where are you giving a little bit of breathing room for the creativity of the teachers, the kind of natural exploring that students like to do?
Thank you, Miss.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Catherine. Whichever.
No, go ahead, Oscar.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So what you saw there, Member Meadow, was my very passionate response to being in very heavily analytical person. But I'm also very poetic, so I can wax poetic as well. And I know that Member Paris last year, she kind of told me that I needed to tone that down a little bit. So I was trying hard not to do that this year. She's laughing.
However, it may be that everybody else has it in your audience here has a completely different
no, it's okay.
And you'd be going, oh boy.
Yes. No. So let's talk about the richness of the content of the classical model, which I think is one of its selling points to a lot of our parents. Our children, the image that we use on a classical model or classical education is that the children are really being exposed to a feast. It's just a feast of you set a table out before them of all types of delicacies, sweets, meats, food, and they get to try every little bit of everything. And it's just this jovial image. It's this kingly or queenly image.
I would say kingly, because if you're doing the classics, I had a colleague who once said, well, I suppose if we were going to teach the classics and something about a woman, we could teach Sappho. And we know that that's forbidden. So in Texas. We're certainly not going to be.
Might be certainly
forbidden
Texas. That's right. But it's a regal feast where the children are just constantly exposed to all kinds of things. And the reason why I overemphasize the structure of it is because we want to make sure that we're equitable. We want to make sure that every child, there's a baseline. There's a baseline that every child needs to meet, and that is we're ensuring that every single person coming to our school, no matter where they come from, what their socioeconomic status is, they get the same content because we're going to be engaging that prior knowledge as a school. So everyone starts on the same place. And whenever we need to close those gaps, that's where we can be very structured and analytical and purposeful. But above that baseline, that's where our children are given the opportunity to engage their imaginations. They're giving their opportunity to really explore things. In every classroom, for example, you'll see that there's this bookshelf full of just a variety of books that they can pick from without guidance from the teacher, but it's just what interests them. Every classroom is going to give the children an opportunity to explore whatever area that they're interested in and they'd like to research. We're going to make sure that that's available to them. The students are provided a lot of poetry as well that they can work with, and it's poetry from all different cultures as well. So again, it's a very rich content heavy curriculum that allows for a lot of that creativity and imagination, and most importantly, a sense of wonder. Because that's really what we're all about as a classical school. If our children lose that sense of wonder, then we've really failed them. And we're nothing more than a prep school. We're nothing more than teaching to the test, if you've just pointed out. We've failed them if there is no joy in the pursuit of learning. So one of the things we like to do culturally at our school is called the curriculum celebration. And we do these celebrations at the end of a unit. So for example, in first grade, while they're reading about electricity, and they've read about some famous scientists who discovered electricity, and they've read about all these other experiments. At the end of that unit, we dedicate a full day, sometimes just a half day, depending on the schedule, where the children don't follow the programmatic scheduled day, but they have what we call a celebration, and the parents are involved, the community gets involved, they get to dress up in the costumes of the scientists that they're studying, and they get to rotate from one classroom to the other and get to see projects that have been put on by specific sections or grades on electricity. And the whole day is dedicated just to have fun. The whole schedule is thrown out the window. It's a little bit like a Tom Sawyer type playing hooky, but at school, where everyone gets to celebrate what they've learned over the last 4 weeks. And that's just one example of how we make school a place of joy and fun and exploration.
Could I just chime in there on what
Yes.
what you were saying, Doctor? So I know from what many classical schools do and what my own program does is it's, as Oscar is saying, just so literature rich and really high quality literature, and really emphasizing reading aloud to the children, just excellent literature. So in addition to the phonics, they're also hearing the beauty of the language in this rich literature that's, at a level that's some higher than what they could read themselves. And then also with the poetry. So for instance, in the curriculum that I have, it's been used after school, but I've also had some schools use it during the school day. So they will read, for instance, a beautiful story. We have Greek mythology with these very kind of creative images from different cultures. And then we also, for each story, have rhymed couplets. So it summarizes that story in poetry. And so that really lends itself to the children memorizing it in rhymed couplets. When I've worked with students, I had talented spoken word artists, college student who rapped them, put them over beats. And that was another way that children interacted with the material. So they were getting it read to them. And then the curriculum also has dictation tiered at different levels, simple sentence for students to kind of write what they hear. Then they can interact with that same story in poetry, as straightforward poetry or rapping it. we encourage narration, where the students kind of get into the story and retell it. And they could do that through putting on costumes and retelling it that way. So they're interacting with it in all these different ways. And so the phonics would be the foundation, but then they're really invited to enter imaginatively in a variety of ways with the literature.
And I would just like to add, in our curriculum, we have an extensive art and music program that is aligned with our literature and history program. So the students are getting those aesthetics in other disciplines that are, I think, provide a creative outlet for them as well.
At our classical schools, we also do a little practice, and I think this goes to address your other concern, Member Metero, which was the teaching to the test. There is a very important practice that we have to do deliberately, and I teach my teachers this, and I expect it from them all the time, which is I want you to be able to just enjoy teaching and not grade what you're teaching. So there's going to be times throughout the school day, every day, when the teacher, it's teacher-led, there's going to be a moment, multiple moments, where we're not grading this. We're just doing it because we love it. And they're going to verbalize that. They're going to make that very vocal. They're going to make sure that the students understand, hey, we're doing something here because it's good in itself and it makes me feel good. And I enjoy listening to this story, and I'm not expected to perform or answer a question for a grade or for a point. This is just a moment of leisure. So leisure plays a big role in the classical movement as well, which is we're going to read a story or recite a poem, or we're going to watch or look at a flower, observe a flower, or maybe some of the chickens in our chicken coop that we plan to have. And we're just going to do that because it's good for the soul, right? For the mind. We're not expecting anything in return except doing the thing itself for its own good. So that's a big practice that we do. And we want to make sure that our students, it's a big step in their learning to become lifelong learners. Because if there's constantly doing things just to get points or to, get recognition, then they're not doing it for its own sake. And at a classical school, we want to teach them, we do this because it's just good to do. So we do that often. You'll see that our hallways are going to be covered in beautiful artwork that our teachers are going to give the students tours throughout the day. They're gonna break, is what we call breaking the schedule, break the rules of the schedule. They're just going to say, okay, you know what? Today I just want to go look at that painting with you guys. Let's go do that, right? I know we're supposed to be here right now covering this unit in history, but why don't we just stop for a moment and just contemplate beautiful artwork together? So those are kind of things that we do at classical schools, just to address your question.
Thank you. I hope you're teaching them the four rhetorical modes, and have a little bit of analysis in there too. And I've asked every other group that is proposing a charter, do you have the environmental report on the locations that you're scouting to make sure that they're not near fracking sites, places that are, bad air quality, bad water quality, and all of that. So that's my parting question.
Deborah, you're muted.
Go ahead, Oscar.
Oh, I think Deborah was trying to talk.
Deb, you're muted.
Yeah, I know. For whatever reason, my bar is not going all the way down. Anyway, so we have been really blessed to be able to work with Lindbeck Construction and Engineering since we started in this process about 3 years ago. Lindbeck is an organization that has been around in construction and design and engineering and evaluation for over 40 years. Third generation, out of Houston, Texas, work internationally, but basically nationally. And they have a group that just does schools. And we work with the VP of that group, who's an engineer, who doesn't do anything in any facility until he checks and makes sure the soil, what's been there before, and on and on and on. We've used his reports a couple of times on different locations, and they're extremely thorough. So I can confidently report to you that we will definitely have the information, and we won't be going any place that's not A-OK.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go to Member Perez with the next set of questions.
Thank you. So I would like to ask all of my questions, and I think I have 4 questions. And of course, all of these are for Oscar, and I do appreciate your waxing poetic, but just not today. So the number 1, you have stated that in your executive summary that your program will serve the most disadvantaged students of Northwest Houston. And what I'm wondering is how very similar is it going to be to the 4 very successful low-income, high-minority classical schools in locations such as the Bronx, Nashville, Jacksonville, Florida, and Washington, D.C.? And very specifically, the student demographic for each of these out-of-state classical schools for economically disadvantaged Hispanic students and English learners. And of course, I have follow-up questions for that.
Yes, to quickly answer that first question, we're going to be nearly identical in when it comes to the curriculum and the model. So there's a very different, very important distinction there. The model itself is really what's leading to a lot of the success of the school. And I can say that confidently because I've actually been in communication with both the CEO of the South Bronx Classical School as well as the school in Washington, D.C. We've been talking about their model, how we're different, how we're similar. And if Stuart approves it, I have planned a trip to Washington, D.C., where I'm going to tour the Washington School. So those are, it's exciting that we're now collaborating, something that we were not doing last year, that we're doing this year moving forward.
Okay, so I'm going to state some numbers here. And if my numbers are not your numbers, then let's make sure we get on the same page, okay? Your intention in Northwest Houston is to serve 55% Hispanic, 69% economically disadvantaged, 37% English learner, 59% at risk. Did those numbers sound right to you?
They do sound right, and they're different from the South Bronx. So I will admit that, and we can go into the details, yes.
Right, because according to the data from the state departments of education, charter authorizers, 3 of these 4 schools referenced are not majority low income. In addition, they're not representative of the demographics that you intend to serve in Northwest Houston because they serve such a low percentage of Hispanic students and a low percentage of English learners. And so perhaps before our next meeting in June, you might bring in, I think I will ask for quite a bit more clarification on that because of the discrepancies here. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you, because I think it raises a legitimate question as to whether the classical model is an effective model for economically disadvantaged students and particularly English learners, especially because these students have so many other charter options and district options, particularly in Northwest Houston, right? Because I use the word saturation. And I think many ISDs might use that same word, particularly when we're looking at recapture. And so if you could please put those numbers together, and of course you'll send them to Ms. Shetty to distribute to all of us before our June meeting. And I guess probably by the end of May, you will have those, right?
Oh, actually, I already do have them, so we can make sure to get those by the end of this week. I do feel confident that they are comparable, but I'll double check. My data suggests that it is very high and low income, but I look forward to talking in June. That's a good sign.
Well, I figure, right, if the recent past is any predictor, right, we'll be seeing each other in June. So my next question, and I apologize, and I'm going to say Dr. Ortiz because I'm assuming there's a PhD behind your name.
Just a master's, Member Paris.
Okay. Earlier in your conversation today, you said that all of your potential teacher hires are going to receive a minimum of 300 hours of teacher training, which I'm assuming is professional development, you specifically stated that it will be in TEKS training. Did I hear that correctly?
Part of it is TEKS training. There is a big chunk of it that's going to be SPED training, as well as at-risk training for at-risk populations. Okay. So it's divided into categories. It's not all TEKS, but it's primarily TEKS and SPED.
So you said that this is, and you specifically said under your tutelage. So, and here's my apology. I've never seen your bio. I've never seen your CV. So what are your specific credentials and education that has prepared you to be the person to provide this training?
So I've been a teacher in the classroom all 7 years that I've been a school principal as well. And that's really what's given me the, I guess, the expertise to work with teachers. I've also been an instructional coach for 5 of those 7 years, which I've been working with teachers as well. Now, it won't be totally all mine. So if I miscommunicated there, my apologies. We will be bringing in some outside training as well. And we're going to be relying on some of the regions. So I believe it's Region 4 in Houston for some of that training as well. So it's going to be a combination of my tutelage as well as the TEA and the regions themselves that offer that training for free. However, I do want to say that as a teacher and as an instructional coach, I was very successful in teaching our teachers how to become better in the classroom, both with classroom management and specifically academically. So that's really my strength. Going into school for a philosophy degree and getting my master's as well in philosophy, that's kind of my strength, is the academic side of things. I do like to brag about my operational skills, but academics is mostly my forte.
Thank you for that explanation. So in addition to the numbers that I just asked for, if you could provide, and if you've already provided, I'll get that from Ms. Shetty, but if you have not, can you put together a bio or a CV that specifically addresses exactly what it is you're going to do? And then my bigger interest, of course, is the tutelage of your tutelage of the training of these potential future hires. And the last question I have goes to the very, I think, detailed conversation about how Heritage Classical is more attractive to the teachers that you hope to hire. And one of the things you said, and again, if I didn't understand this correctly, please restate it in a way that helps me understand it better. But one of the things you said was, because of what's being taught, teachers are going to love it more, right? Being an English teacher in 8th grade, where it's one of the most standards taught, most standards tested, it's very difficult to love everything I have to teach, right? However, regardless of what texts you're using to teach your content, you still have to teach the state requirements, right? But what caught my attention beyond that was the teacher pay cut. You said something along the lines of the individuals that you've spoken with are okay with the teacher pay cut because they're going to be able to teach more of what they love, right? So I'm not really asking you to explain how you're going to accomplish allowing teachers to teach more of what they love, regardless of how they are required by law to teach the state standards. Who did you talk to? And I'm not asking for names. I'm just saying, did you do a survey, or how did you come to the conclusion that despite a pay cut, you still have a long list of potential applicants, potential hires that are ready to jump ship from ISDs and over to Heritage Classical?
I want to jump in real quickly on the pay scale part of your question. We have built a budget around competitive salaries. I think what Oscar was implying is that, and what has been my life experience and many of our board members' life experiences, is that pay is not always the number one. In fact, it's rarely the number one determining factor on job satisfaction. There are a lot of other things in terms of culture, environment, colleagues. There are a lot of things that go into job satisfaction, job retention, and people even seeking jobs. So I don't think Oscar was implying that we're going to advertise, hey, we pay less, but you're going to love it. I don't think that's what he's talking about. So we have built a budget around competitive salaries in the Houston market. But that being said, then I'll turn it over to Oscar. We do believe that that pay is not going to be the #1 determining factor on whether our teachers want to work for us or enjoy working for us and will stay working for us. That's my sort of budget perspective.
Thank you, Stuart. I appreciate that. Yes, that's true. And he couldn't have said it. I couldn't have said it better than how Stuart did. I did not mean to say that we were going to be paying our teachers less. It was more of an anecdotal. There's been multiple times in which I've had teachers express that to me explicitly, which is, I'm so happy here. I would do whatever I can to just work in a place like this, but we're not doing that is very important. I'm glad that Stuart clarified that. To address your second part of the question, though, about teaching everything and sometimes being required by the TEKS to teach things that you might not be, you might not like necessarily. What makes it so enjoyable for our teachers to teach the class is that we rely heavily on primary texts. Now, a textbook can be very insightful, but even in my own experience with content that I love, teaching from a textbook is really one of the most tedious things I've ever done. It's just absolutely boring. What allows creativity for a teacher and allows them that room to be able to be explorative and engaging is to be able to go to the actual primary sources, to look at letters written in the period, books written in the period, biographies, to teach from their love of the content itself. So there will be, yes, there will be instances where I have to teach about, say, in 7th grade, some of the pioneers that I might not be familiar with, but because I'm teaching from a primary text, it changes the game and it makes it much more engaging and interesting for the teacher himself or herself. So I've seen that distinction or that difference happen in the life of our own teachers, where they're just completely caught on and engaged into this new way of teaching because they're actually learning as well, given that they're not just teaching from a textbook anymore at this point. Does that make sense?
Go back?
Hopefully
yes,
that makes sense.
It absolutely did. It does. And so, when you're teaching from a primary text, that sounds great. But when you're teaching parts of speech, it's probably not something you love as much as primary text, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So to summarize the bigger point that I want to get to here, much like we have a waiting list of students to get into charter buildings or charter schools, does Heritage have anything? And I don't mean to get so specific. I don't want you to tell me, where you're talking to people, who these individuals are. I don't mean to try to violate anybody's privacy, but do you have a data bank of individuals that you're already speaking to as potential applicants, potential hires, and these individuals have already shared with you their desire to work in the Northwest Heritage Classical should it be awarded this year?
So we have an informal, there's been some informal communication from teachers who've reached out to us through our social media platforms, Twitter, our Facebooks, but nothing formal where they can actually go in and apply. Right. We haven't done that yet. Okay. So we don't have, I would say, hard numbers to be able to show that, except one instance, which is just last week, we went ahead and asked our families, those 982 members who have already signed up for our newsletter and have asked to stay in communication or to stay up to date with us. We've just emailed them last week, an email saying, we'd like to know how many of you would be interested in enrolling your children into our campus. And as of last week, we have about 42 families who filled that with information about their children, as well as their location. So 42, I could say, yes, we have that list right there, but everything else has been
42. But that's 42 potential. It's 42 families that, 1 or 2 students, right? Yep. But what I'm wondering is, do you have obviously informal, but number of teacher applicants or interests in potential applicants?
No, I haven't done any looking around like that. No. So, it would be a guess if I gave you a number. So I
right.
Yes.
Understood.
But we do have a relationship with Houston Baptist University's teaching program. So they're the teachers, the education program at HBU. We have an agreement with them, and this is in our application, that they are going to provide teachers in training to assist our experienced teachers. So that is in the works already.
That is true.
And you can't make offers or hires without an actual charter.
I'm sorry, Ms. Fraga, I didn't hear what you said.
I said, I think my understanding is that you cannot make an offer letter or a hire without an actual charter. So, I mean, would there be an interest associated, but not, we can't provide actual numbers because of.
Right. So the point of my question was not have you actually made any offers. It was if there is any informal conversation taking place, which would be completely acceptable, right? Because it's all informal based on potentially being awarded this charter. How many of those informal conversations with these potential future heritage classical teachers, did any of those individuals say, I'm okay with making less money at Heritage Classical than I'm making at fill in the blank ISD? And that was the point I was trying to.
Right. Yeah, I think Mr. Saunders addressed that. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perez.
All right, Member Johnson, do you have any questions?
Yes, ma'am, I do. I had the benefit of going to a rural town high school that really had a classical education. I actually have had 5 years of Latin, Catherine, so that, and I hope you'll help me speak it because we don't speak that much at my house anymore. But I do have an appreciation for what you're talking about, but I have some practical questions about the application of your school. One of them, Ms. Perez mentioned saturation. What is the situation in the zip codes in your area? And some of you who live in the 77092 area, or if you in that area close, what is your experience about other classical academies, charter academies in your area? Are there any within a?
I'll speak to that a little bit. I'm pretty familiar with the geography and some of the classical schools. There are no public charter or public high schools with a classical curriculum in 77092. Now, Cy-Fair, which is north of us, does have a classical school, and Katy has a classical school, but those are very far away as where they are geographically located. Cy-Fair is a big school district, and it's just the very southern tip of it that's kind of contiguous with our area, but it goes out for miles past the Beltway. And so what we have to remember is Houston is a very populated area. It has almost 4.5 million people, and the school districts in the suburbs, the likelihood of someone commuting basically an hour to get to our school would be unlikely. And that's how far Katy and this classical school in Cy-Fair is. So I don't think we are saturated with classical education. There are other charter schools in these zip codes. There is a Harmony, there's a KIP, there's a Yes Prep in these areas, but those are different models than what we're doing. And none of the ISD schools are classical in their curriculum.
Okay.
I would also add, in terms of the saturation element of your question, Families Empowered is a nonprofit organization that tries to connect consumer or family demand to education options, and they keep a lot of data on terms of wait lists and how many people are asking for charter options. And I don't know the number off the top of my head, but we've been working with Families Empowered, and they have there is a wait list of families looking for education options in our geographic boundaries.
Okay. I see in 77093 East Tex Jensen Classical School. I don't know their model, but they only have 9 on their waiting list. And 77042, again, I'm not sure how close that is to you. West Chase Classical have 36 on their waiting list. So I don't know if they're comparable models, but they're called classical.
They may be classical, but they're time-wise. You have to think about Houston in terms of how long does it take to get there. West Chase is very far from us. It's Jensen is east of us. So neither one of those schools, I don't think we would be in any competition with those families.
Okay. Another question I would have would be about transportation, because as you pointed out, Houston is spread out. So tell me about your goals, and Oscar, I guess you can probably address this. What are your goals for transportation for students?
Actually, I'll take a stab at that. We sort of have a multi-pronged approach to transportation, because it's our goal that lack of transportation or difficulty getting to school will not be a barrier for anybody that wants to come to our school. So first and foremost, we've budgeted in our year one to purchase a minibus that's going to, and we're going to be a small school. Remember, we're going to be K1. So we're going to have one minibus. Now, it won't be able to accommodate 100% of our student population, but it will be able to accommodate a significant percentage of the students that absolutely have no other way of getting to school. But we're hoping that we can address their needs, first of all, location-wise, where the zip code that we're focusing in and our geographic boundaries is fairly high density residential, so that alone reduces commute times and drive times. So we're, that by reducing drive times, we make it easier for families to get to school. As the children get older, granted, it's not going to be really an option for kindergarten and first graders, but as our student population ages, as we add grades, our proximity to the high density residential will allow for walking and bicycling options. Also, a couple of years ago, member Lawrence Allen told us about a school that he thought had been creative in terms of the school operating as sort of a communication hub, and they created a map where their families, they sort of identified where their families were on the map, and they acted as a communication hub to connect those families so that they could work amongst themselves to create multifamily carpools, so that the families of the school could support each other in getting to and from school with carpool and ride sharing. We intend to operate, extended day and after school programs, and that extra time is a big benefit for working families where they can get either to school or pick up after school with more flexible hours that can accommodate their work demands. And of course, again, it's not really going to be applicable for kindergartners and first graders, but as the student population ages, Houston Metro can be an option. They can have discounted fares for, we'll work with Metro in getting discounted fares, bus fares for the older kids to get to and from school. And then we've also been working with some nonprofits in Houston that focus on and are trying to kind of crack the code in terms of charter school transportation, and maybe working with multiple charter schools that might have minibuses or buses that they can share or do ride sharing among various charter schools. So we're sort of hopeful that when you combine all of those various approaches, that there won't be any students that are having too much difficulty getting to school. And again, as the last resort, we have our bus that we intend to. Oh, and we have one bus in year one, and we budgeted to buy a second one in year two, and again in year 3, 4, and 5. So we're going to be adding a minibus to our fleet every year to have additional transportation to offer to our families.
I have one more question. I know we're just about out of time, but let me ask you one more thing. I know that most charter schools have the issue of attrition, and I don't know exactly what your attrition might be, but how do you fill in those when you expand to, say, K through 8? when you are losing students at the higher level of your classes, say 6, 7, and 8, how do you fill in those spaces with students and bring them up to speed? Oscar, this might be a good question for you, because all of a sudden you've got everybody else in there that's been going there 3 or 4 years, and now these have coming in later in the game. How do you bring them up to speed to be at the same level or close as those who are currently 7th and 8th graders?
So charter school data, and in particular the South Classical Bronx, the Bronx South Classical School, in addition to the other schools that we put in our application, you can see that their trends are actually in the opposite direction. It's very rare for families to leave the school unless there's some military relocation that happens, or a job relocation, but most families are actually fighting to get in. Now, let's talk about some of that attrition though. So we see most of the attrition happening in the transition between 8th into high school. Since we're going to be a K-8 school, we're going to not be seeing some of that attrition that you can point at from other charter schools. So it's primarily going to happen when they move from 5th into 6th, which is going to be, it's been rare in my experience. It's going to be a very small percentage of our population. And so it's a couple of seats that we generally have to fill every year. 1 seat or 2 seats at most is what I've seen when it's been a bad year, for example, per grade. So to work with those children, we have a plan that we've set in place, Member Johnson, which is it's kind of the accelerated learning program that we're already going to be utilizing for all of our students. But this one's mostly dedicated for children, for example, who never had exposure to Latin or never had exposure to some of the Greek prefixes and suffixes that our students are going to be already familiar with, who are not used to the kind of rigor or expectations that we have. And we put them through this 3-week program that involves some very heavy study skills teaching. What we've noticed in the past is that what happens is there is a certain habituating that has to happen for a child to succeed and thrive at our school. So we hold their hand and we work alongside them. We don't just abandon them and assume that they're going to learn to swim on their own. We really walk every single child who comes to our door through this 3-week program. And then we have a mentorship program that ensures that someone follows that child from the beginning of the year to the end of the year to make sure that they're succeeding. So those 2 things hand in hand really work well together. Now, the study skills program, I'm particularly proud of it because I put this together with a team of teachers many years ago, and we've been refining it every year and really working on the onboarding process of a new student, for example, who comes in the middle of the year, which happens sometimes. When that happens, we put them through this program. And what I like about it is that it involves the family. So a child can it could be adapted to a child, for example, that doesn't have supports at home, but it is very good to involve the family in this program as well. And what it takes is really creating a space at home that reflects the space at school, because what's happening most of the time is our students are doing their homework on their beds, or they're doing the homework with the TV on, or they're doing their homework in a space where everyone's running and there's distractions. So there's very important, we've already delineated and enumerated study skills that our children need to learn, that our families need to kind of adapt to and accommodate to in order to help the child become successful academically in our program. And we do that really well, very seamlessly, because as Catherine pointed out earlier at the beginning of the year, we're already in their living rooms. That's how we start out the year. We make a home visit for every family who wants us to be there, of course, and we build those relationships from the start. So our families are kind of used to our presence, and they're used to that partnership that we have with them. So hopefully that answers your question, Member Johnson.
Thank you.
Any remaining questions from our State Board of Education members? All right, so we are at the close of our interview today. I have one housekeeping item that I need to do that I did not do before we started our panel today. I want to verify the number of campuses, the grade span, and the maximum enrollment. So to ensure that we've reflected the sponsoring entity's request, you're seeking to serve a maximum student body, this is in year 5, of 756 students in grades pre-K 3 through 5 at one campus. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So we thank you for your participation today. We will bring our interview to a close. You'll be notified of the commissioner's proposal on or around May 27th. And then we will adjourn for today. Our next capacity interview will begin tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. for our live streaming public. And we thank you for your time and effort and you've put forth into the application and participating in the interview process today.
Thank you all too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Thank you.